Ever feel like you're trying to see through a really dense fog when it comes to complex regulations, especially the ones hitting home energy efficiency, maybe even your own bills? Yeah, well, I'm definitely not alone there. Today, we're going to try and cut through some of that fog. We're doing a deep dive into some important, maybe big granular updates from Ofgem. They've just put out their final decisions on administrative changes to two really key UK government schemes, ECO4 and the Great British Insulation Scheme. Let's just call it GBIS. Right, so let's unpack this a bit. For anyone less familiar, ECO4 and GBIS, they're basically big programs aimed at boosting home energy efficiency across the UK. The main goals are, cutting heating costs for people and lowering the UK's carbon emissions overall. Pretty vital stuff. The source we're digging into today is this decision document Ofgem published June 26, 2025. It lays out Ofgem's final take on how they'll handle administratively a bunch of mid-scheme changes. These came down from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, or DESNZ.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is getting clear on Ofgem's specific role. This document, it isn't really about the policy changes. DESNZ sets the policy direction, right? This is all about Ofgem, the administrator, focusing on the nuts and bolts, the practical side. How do these policies actually get put into action day to day? It really highlights that that careful balancing act between what the government wants to achieve policy-wise and what's actually workable on the ground, administratively speaking.
Exactly. And that's our mission today. We want to boil down these key admin decisions, maybe pull out some surprising details hidden in the fine print, and, importantly, explore what it all means for energy suppliers, for the installers doing the work, and, of course, for you. Whether you might get help from these schemes or just want to stay informed on UK energy matters, this is for you. Okay, let's jump straight in. First big area, how these schemes actually get delivered and managed. And this is where it starts getting really interesting, particularly for insulation projects. So first up, this idea of multiple insulation measures under GBIS. Ofgem had proposed allowing things like, say, loft and cavity wall insulation within one single GBIS project. And what's interesting is the feedback they got, pretty strong agreement. 12 out of 16 respondents saw real benefits. They said it'd mean more homes get treated, bigger bill savings for people. That's a clear win.
Absolutely. And Ofgem's final administrative approach here is, well, quite smart, actually. They're going to use the existing Trustmark project reference numbers.
Instead of creating new ones.
Exactly. Trustmark, the government-backed quality scheme, using their existing system just cuts down on the admin burden, makes processing quicker. Now, here's a key detail, maybe a bit of a surprise for some. Ofgem's clarified that a single supplier has to promote both the main insulation measure and any secondary ones in the same retrofit.
So you can't mix and match suppliers for one project.
No, and that's not Ofgem deciding that it's actually written in the legislation. It mirrors how ECO already works. You can't split one project notification across different suppliers. And they were very clear. If a retrofit is already completed, you absolutely cannot add secondary insulation measures to it after the fact. Oh, and a quick point on floor insulation. Solid floor and underfloor, they're treated as separate types. But from November 14th, 2024, they can be installed together in one go. So that simplifies things a bit.
Right. That makes sense. Leverage existing systems, stick to the rules, avoid extra paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that covers the physical insulation side. What about newer tech, like smart thermostats? How are they being handled?
It's fairly straightforward, actually. The register for notifying smart thermostats, it's live now. But these measures will sit as on hold until the actual legislation kicks in. And the crucial bit. Ofgem is stressing that only smart thermostats completed on or after November 14th, 2024 are eligible to be notified as smart thermostat measures. That date is key.
A hard cutoff, then.
Definitely. And there's a technical detail on scoring, too. If the home energy assessment used the older RDSAP 2012 method, that's the calculation for the EPC, the Energy Performance Certificate, then the thermostat has to meet the Boiler Plus standard. But if the assessment used the newer RDSAP 10, the specific thermostat model needs to be listed in the Product Characteristics Database, the PCDB. It's basically an approved list. Ensures only efficient kit counts.
Okay, that level of detail shows how specific they need to be. Right, next up, something that gives suppliers a bit more flexibility. Reassigning ECO4 savings, the annual bill savings, ABS, to meet their GBIS targets. Heard there was an update from DSNZ on this.
Yes, and this is a really important clarification. It affects how suppliers plan things out. So, despite what might have been suggested before, GBIS annual targets are staying. They're not being removed. Instead, any ECO4 savings that get reassigned will count towards a supplier's overall heating cost reduction target and their low-income minimum requirement. It won't count against specific GBIS phases.
I see.
So if you look at the bigger picture, it gives suppliers much more flexibility, doesn't it? They can use success in ECO4 to help meet their overall GBIS obligations. Could really help speed things up overall.
So for you listening, this supplier flexibility could mean measures get rolled out more efficiently overall. What about the timing? When do suppliers need to signal their plans for this reassignment?
Okay, so the initial non-binding plan for reassigning ECO4 delivery, that's now due sometime after July 2025. It's slipped a bit from May-June. But the really firm deadline, the formal request where they confirm the exact amount they want to reassign, that's set in law, July 31st, 2026. And Ofgem's made their position clear on rejections too. If a reassignment request gets rejected, the amount gets deducted from the source scheme, so ECO4 in this case. Suppliers really need to factor that risk into their ECO4 planning. But they did reassure folks that any transfers of obligations between suppliers will be sorted out before reassignment happens. Avoids any double counting mess.
And how will we see this reported? Will it be clear how much is being reassigned?
Ofgem says they'll carry on reporting progress for both schemes like normal. The actual reassignment will only show up in the official reports after the final determination, so you'll see the end result. They might give individual suppliers more detailed breakdowns privately to help them track progress, but the public reports will reflect the final adjusted numbers.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's talk about maintaining quality and how some specific measures are handled. What's the story with installation standards? Any changes there?
Right, the standards. Ofgem confirmed they'll administer things according to the updated PAS 2035-2030.2023 standards. That kicks in properly after the transition period ends, which is March 30th, 2025. PAS, that's publicly available specification. These standards are, well, crucial. They set the best practice for home retrofits, making sure work is safe, effective, high quality. But it's important to be clear on Ofgem's role. They're not in charge of sorting out transitional arrangements for projects started under the old standards. That's the government's job.
Okay.
And Ofgem doesn't interpret the new standards either. If installers or suppliers have questions on the specifics, they need to talk to their certification bodies or Trustmark. Ofgem just enforces the standards that are legally required.
So Ofgem enforces the new rules from March 2025, but government and industry bodies handle the transition and interpretation. Makes sense. Okay, let's zoom in on a couple of really specific tweaks, one about heat pumps, one about geography.
Sure. First, shared ground loop, ground source heat pumps, SGL, GSHPs as potential innovation measures, IMs. These are basically newer technologies needing special approval. Ofgem's just getting ready. They'll update their systems so these can be notified if one actually gets approved as an innovation measure down the line. They reassured everyone this won't change the quality checks. But suppliers will need to keep extra evidence for any approved IMs, just like they do for other innovations. It's about being ready for new tech, but only once it's properly vetted.
Right, future-proofing the system. Now, this next one sounds niche, maybe, but the definition of a rural area that can really matter for project eligibility in these schemes, can it? What's the update there?
It really can matter. This is a perfect example of admin detail having a real impact. Ofgem's moving to updated rural datasets. The key is when a project or measure is notified determines which dataset applies. For ECO4 projects, it's the date they're first notified. For GBIS measures, it's simply the date they are notified. And here's where it gets interesting, the actual detail. England and Wales get a new 2021 rural-urban classification that was published March 2025. It uses just 3 simpler categories and different codes than before. Meanwhile, Scotland's classification, published back in December 2024, that stays the same.
So England and Wales change, Scotland doesn't.
Exactly. And this isn't just lines on a map changing slightly. It could genuinely mean some homes previously just outside the rural zone and maybe ineligible for certain uplifts might now qualify. Or, the other way around. It could reshape where some of this funding and effort gets focused. Ofgem's keeping a close eye on when these new datasets actually appear in the official ONS postcode directory. They'll update their guidance with the new codes once it's all live.
Okay, so wrapping this up, as we've explored today, these latest decisions from Ofgem really clarify the detailed administrative plumbing for ECO4 and GBIS here in the UK. We've touched on everything from making it easier to do multiple installations to the specific dates and rules for notifying smart thermostats, how funding can be moved between schemes, the latest on quality standards, and even down to how rural is defined.
So what does this all mean? I think it just underscores the huge, often invisible administrative machinery needed to actually deliver these big national energy efficiency drives. All these details we discussed, it might seem small, maybe even fiddly, but they're absolutely critical for ensuring compliance, for suppliers managing their obligations, and ultimately for getting these energy-saving measures rolled out effectively across the UK. They're the gears, really, that make the whole thing work.
So here's something to think about. How do these administrative choices, the stuff that looks like bureaucratic fine print, actually shape the real-world impact of these crucial energy programs? Think about how they might speed things up or maybe slow things down, how they influence which homes actually get these vital upgrades. And could these administrative complexities encourage or maybe even discourage companies from getting involved? What might that mean for the bigger picture of cutting carbon and lowering energy bills for everyone, particularly for those who need that help the most?